Welcome back to Voice of the Valley. Today we have a very special guest, Pete Reinke. He is known as the godfather within the Lehigh Valley. How are you doing today, Pete?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Awesome, man. So first of all, in simple terms, what is networking?
So networking is something that I've been doing for 20 years. And the whole thing of networking is to get yourself out there, to meet people, to know people. So you can network for business, you can network in your neighborhood, you can network at your school, that kind of thing. But networking is just getting out of your comfort zone and getting people to know who you are. Mm-hmm. That's really how I always have summarized networking.
Mm-hmm. And then you run a networking event called Friends with Pete, correct?
So I've had this Friends of Pete that I started about 20 years ago. I started here in the Lehigh Valley as a monthly happy hour. And so every month we pick a bar or restaurant and invite people to come to get together. When COVID hit, we added a lunch and learn. So now every month we do a lunch and learn where people come together, pay for their lunch, and we get a speaker to share information. So I've been doing that. I've been doing this for a long time.
So what makes a networking group actually work?
So you have to have buy-in, connection, and commitment, I think, is how I would sum it up. One of the things I was just saying to you guys is I think that even though networking's been a huge part of my life, networking is falling off a little bit because there's too many events. I have a partner and Friends of Pete, Seth Rubin, who has this awesome thing that's called Valley Networking. Network Lehigh Valley. So Network Lehigh Valley is a website that lists all the networking groups. So if you guys or anybody else would go look at that, every single day there's multiple events. So you'd find yourself exhausted just running around to find, this event or that event. But what makes a good group is it's consistency. It's coming in, it's providing value. To me, it's meeting at the same time of the week, the same day of the week or whatever, so that people know that you're there. Maybe it's every week, maybe it's every other month. But that's how I would summarize how that works.
Gotcha. And what's the biggest kind of misconception about networking?
Well, I think people think networking can be a waste of time. Like, why would I go to this event? Because people in life, people are, people are hustling. They're out trying to make a living, provide for their family and things like that. And networking historically was something where you come around and it's just meeting some guys and sort of BSing and chatting. It's like, that's cool. I like doing that with my friends. Why would I do it with a guy or lady I don't know? And to me, that's the very essence of it. It's to meet people, to find out what they know that you don't know. What is it you're trying to accomplish? And then having that ongoing dialogue.
Have you seen, having your networking event, Friends of Pete,
Yep.
Have you seen any lives or any businesses change from one single connection?
So I see that all the time. Part of what I've always done at those events is, if you guys go to those events, as Joe, as you've done in the past, is you go there and my closest, as an old man, I'll be 63 in a couple of weeks. As an old man, I still have my best friends and stuff like that. They never come to Friends of Pete because they're like, we don't even get a chance to talk to you because you're talking to somebody else. Because I've done it for so long, explicitly try to talk to the first-time people and the new people to get engaged with them. But people have learned over that time, not just with me, but with everybody else there. When you show up, it might just be to have a drink or have a good time, check out a new venue, but you're asking, I need help with this or that. And then I'm connecting people. And so I've had stories for the last 30 years of connections I made to people that have led to them, creating wealth, getting their big client, finding their new office space, that kind of thing.
What about people that suffer with social anxiety and they have a difficult time going out and they feel shy about making connections? How can they get over that fear?
So that's one of the things that whenever everybody asks me that question, the people that I admire the most when it comes to networking are people that are shy and nervous and have that social anxiety. But unless you're doing something or living a life where you're on your own or with just a couple of people, you have to get out and about. And so to me, one of the key things I'd always say is find a friend or two to bring there so you're not quite so nervous, and then come on and talk. But that's an admirable thing in my mind, actually, is to be shy and reserved and not, put yourself out there like I do every day. But you need to do it, I think, to get ahead in life. It's just you need to get out of your comfort zone. And I think you go to a networking event, you're not somewhere where it's such a public place where you're going to be outed or feel nervous or, shamed or, scared, intimidated. It's just, maybe you just don't like conversation. Well, then find a quiet corner and talk to your friend. And then somebody like me will walk over and say, hey, I haven't seen you before. So, because I'm shy, and then you kind of open the door. So that's how I'd say that.
What do you think? So do you think that separates the people that attract the opportunities, the people that come up to them, or the people that struggle?
Well, so again, it's, the idea of networking is for everybody. As I said, it's like, unless you're independently wealthy or, again, like to be by yourself, you got to be out and about. And so it's don't go to the same thing all the time if it's the same people. There's so many events. As I said, I'll go to something where I'll meet somebody, in the middle of the morning, and we have a nice conversation. And then the guy says, "Oh, I'll see you in 20 minutes when we get to the lunch spot." I just talked to you. Like, what are we going to talk about in 10 minutes? So
exactly.
It's spreading things out. And one of the things that for 2026 that I'm trying to do more and more in the networking world is connect the networking groups to industry groups. So the Association of Realtors, the Manufacturers Association, the Human Resource Professionals, the Bar Association. So those are groups that bring together people that do the same thing, right? But if you go to an event with all the other real estate investors or all the other, podcasters and all this kind of stuff, it's like, it's cool, but do you really want to tell your competitor all your tips? So there's this balance of how do you make those come together, I think.
I agree. So someone's walking into a room, they don't know anybody. Yep. What's the first thing they should do?
So part of it is always just find somebody to, first of all, whenever you do any of this stuff, I think in general is, even if you're nervous or anxious, is smile and laugh if you can. So walk up, make eye contact. And like my thing is just come and say, "Hey, I'm Pete. How you doing?" And that starts it. And somebody looks at you like, who cares? But it's like, at least you get a conversation started. So you have to do that. And as I said, I'm big on the bring a friend, not bring 20 friends, but bring a friend. So then you're sitting there, at least you have somebody else. If somebody's standoffish, you can at least turn to your buddy and have some sort of conversation. Because you don't want to stand there frozen and feel like you're a statue or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, is it an art to be a networker and, more importantly, be a people person? Because you have to watch, like, let's just say if it's your first time walking into this room, you don't know anyone. Is it an art to be able to attract a room towards you and have that room gravitate towards you, because at the end of the day, you're going to that networking event to gain knowledge or power or some sort of monetary benefit, right? So is it an art that you can just show up there by yourself and conquer the room?
Yeah, I think there is an art. I think a lot of it comes with experience. Some of it comes up, I don't know whether it's upbringing or whatever, but that's how I always do. Like, I'll walk into these rooms. I've been doing this for so long. I often know people, but when I walk into a room where I don't know anybody, I still walk in and talk. And I tell this story. I grew up in Philly. I lived in the city for the first 27 years of my life. Occasionally, I go back to an event where there are celebrities. There are athletes, there are musicians, there's business leaders. And one of my friends said, Pete walks in the room, and I'm like, who's that dude? Like, that's just Pete, the networking dude. But I walk in a certain way that people, you come off in a way where people are like, he seems so confident, he must have something behind him. And then it's like, oh, it's just a regular guy. So I think that's a way to do it. And you need to, like everything else that you guys do in life, you got to learn it. The first couple of times you do it. But to me, the networking spaces, there's nothing you can do horribly wrong. If it doesn't work, if you're not feeling it, walk through the room and leave. But nobody's going to leave and say, "Wow, what a dud that person was," because they weren't comfortable. I don't think. I rarely see that.
I agree.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Do you read any books that apply to this?
So some people read self-help books and do this stuff all the time. I read every day. One of the weird things about me is like every single day of the year, I go for a walk outside. I live a mile from my alma mater, which was Lafayette College. Every day I go for a walk on the campus. And I'm so overbooked and so manic and all this stuff that when I walk, I read a book or a magazine while I walk. I walk on Lafayette's campus. It takes me an hour. It's 2.5 miles. And so every day I'm reading. So I'll read magazines and stuff like that, but I like to read books. So there's people like Simon Sinek and Jim Collins and some of these things that write really good books about ways to interact with people. I like those things. I also like history novels and mysteries and stuff like that. But there are books out there and some really good writers. In fact, I always encourage people as they're growing their professionally themselves or their business, read some of these books because they're tips on ways to act, and you'll find something that speaks to you in terms of like that. I think I could do that one.
I agree. Do you read the same books over and over, or do you?
I'm somebody where I don't know how you guys are, but it's like, other than listen to music, like I'll watch a movie or TV show. I try to watch it once, and then I'll remember if it was especially great, maybe I'll watch it a little bit again. My wife loves some certain, like everybody loves Raymond, some of those things, she'll watch it and stuff like that. But to me, when I go and we're having a conversation and I cannot just recount what I say and do, but I can recount what you guys say and do, it's sort of like a Groundhog Day thing. And I'm always looking for new challenges, I guess.
Nice.
Interesting. So then you say you live on Lafayette campus, or you're near it?
So I live in Forks Township, which is like about a mile from Lafayette, but I go to Lafayette every day. I drive over.
And you're a professor, I'm guessing.
So I'm not. I was never a professor. In the early 90s, I coached basketball at Lafayette for 5 years as my job. It was awesome. People, when I walk, they always look and get them sometimes when you're dressed like this, like, hey, professor or whatever. But it's like, my dad was a teacher. My dad's 92. He still drives and stuff like that. And he still teaches sometimes. So I take somebody saying somebody's a professor or teacher as a huge compliment. But no, I just walk from, to be outside and get fresh air and stuff like that.
So who are some of the most notable people you've met through networking? Just like throw us. I mean,
it's kind of I don't know if anybody stands out in networking. Again, a lot of what I do here is locally. So, you meet all the elected officials and stuff like that. You met most of the CEOs and stuff like that. People are running for Congress or running to be the mayor, and they'll come to Friends of Pete. Again, I've been around for so long. I know them. What's been flattering about some of my networking events is when somebody's running for office, they'll say, I'm going to come to your event because I want to meet my constituents. But I don't know, again, if you look at the laundry list of people who, are prominent in the Lehigh Valley, and most of them have come through my events at some point. Most of them I've gotten to know at some point. I think of people like Larry Holmes and stuff like that. I've known Larry since I was in high school, or excuse me, in college. But people like that. And again, most CEOs come in, most, real estate leaders, investors, stuff like that.
So how can someone find your networking event? How can they be a part of it? Just try it out.
So I just maybe 6 weeks ago actually started my Friends of Pete as actually a business. So I've always done the networking thing. Now my business is called Friends of Pete, and I'm doing more connecting. In fact, I'll give you guys this card, but it says Connector in Chief. So that's what I do. And so I'm going to keep having more events. I'm going to still have the monthly events, but I'm going to do targeted events. So if you want to get in front of a certain audience, I'll do that. And then people are paying me retainers or hourly fees or referral fees to connecting them to business. So, somebody's trying to put solar or put IT out there, I'll connect them to stuff like that. So, but my partner on some of this stuff, Seth Rubin, has something in it, and it's called Network Lehigh Valley. It's a great website that lists all the events. And then my weird thing after all these years is I'll text people about, there's hundreds of, Joey gets these texts, hundreds of people that I text every month. It just says, here's what the upcoming happy hour, upcoming lunch and learn are doing. And on that calendar, again, it's not just my stuff. It's dozens of other groups that are doing events.
Nice. So what do you think is special about the Lehigh Valley business scene?
So that's always a good question. So again, I always, when everybody asks you your backstory, it's like 27 years in the same house in Philadelphia, and then I've been in Easton for 35 years. So I'm an Eastern Pennsylvania person through and through. But what's interesting is every community can be parochial, right? If you're not from there, you're not welcomed. What's interesting about the Lehigh Valley is it's grown so much over the last 25 years. Is we'll always be a flow of people from New York and New Jersey and things like that. But we're in a unique place where a lot of people that are from countries around the world come here because you can get to the Poconos in, 45 minutes. You can get down to the beach in 2 hours and stuff like that. And so it's a welcoming flow. It's a very open community, I think, if you put yourself out there.
What do you think about networking up and down? Because you can network both up and be with the most powerful people, or network down, or network at your level. Can you give a little bit of information on how you should network each section? So networking from the bottom, networking from people at your stature, and then networking with people that are more powerful.
So that's a great question and something that's really interesting. So when I started these Friends of Pete happy hours about 20 years ago, I worked at the Lehigh Valley Economic Development Corporation. And so I was involved with bringing all the big business leaders together, recruiting all these big businesses. So it was a corporate thing, and it was all high level people in the community and stuff like that. When COVID hit, and when I was at Univest, I was at Univest for 5 years doing business development at Univest Bank. I explicitly during COVID had pivoted to 3 things, and I think Joe knows this, but it's like, so it was young people, it was new people to the community, and it was people who might have lost their job or weren't in the right job. And so of all that I've done in the networking space, I'm extraordinarily proud of helping people that didn't have a connection, that didn't know anybody, that didn't have a background, getting in through that world and getting them known and connected. So I think that's a really important thing. And most people, that's where they start. You're coming out of school, you're starting your own venture, you don't know anybody, that's where you start. What's interesting, as I said, now for 2026, in conjunction with my new kind of business model, is now all those big corporations that I'm talking about, they're reaching out to me again. These are people that I've known for years, but haven't seen much the last 5 years because I was helping members of their teams. And now that you're up there and somebody says, hey, can you get me in front of this person and that person? That's what I do. And so, the high level people, the business owners, the high level corporate leaders, everybody's time is valuable, but they can't just come and chat with somebody and all that stuff. They want to chat with somebody that can help them or who they can help. And so there is that balance. I think a lot of people want to graduate to something where it's like, I only go with other business owners. I only go with other people that are important. To me, everybody's important. But that's, I think, if that makes sense to you guys, that's the distinction that I would make about networking up and networking down. And you got to find your place.
So what are some of the largest mistakes you can make as a networker? Because you can destroy your reputation easily like this. So what are some of the largest mistakes to avoid?
Well, you always laugh, but somebody always says about, just looking the part. You want to dress, people always will call me and ask, how do you dress? And you come to a Friends of Pete thing, like you can come in shorts and a t-shirt, or you can come in a 3-piece suit. It's, but it's usually look presentable, even when you're in your casual affair, just, look like you're well-groomed or whatever. So that's one thing. One thing, the other thing is always, to listen, to put yourself out there, but it's don't interrupt, don't hijack a conversation. A big thing that was really big in networking 25 years ago, and I was doing all this stuff, is you'd show up with a bunch of business cards, or you want to get your card to everybody. There's still an aspect of that, although now a lot of times people do QR codes and stuff like that. But you want people to know who you are, so you want to bring a card up. But it's not being too pushy. It's not trying to sell. One of the big things with somebody's networking is like, I'm busy, I'm important, my business is growing, my family has a lot of time commitments, but I got to go out and network, and I don't have time to be bogged down by this guy that I really don't want to talk to. I don't want to talk to that guy. And you got to balance it, because you never know, the person that you're blowing off disrespectful or rude to, turns out that it's like, hey, who's that dude? Oh, that was the CEO. And then you can never take that back. So that's a way to do it. It's just, but again, there's not a huge number of issues. As I said, when you guys asked me earlier about being nervous about coming out, but when you're first doing it, like, it's not, the mistake you make is not insurmountable. But if you come off, and again, being rude, being combative, being disinterested, those are kind of don'ts, is how I would say it.
I feel like another thing to add to that would be, once you do make that connection with whoever as that is at Friends of Pete's or any networking event, you want to have great communication. So communication is everything when it comes to business. And you want to help these guys actually get referrals as well. You know what I mean? If they're not in the same industry.
Exactly.
So.
And again, one of the things about that is always you want to follow up, right? I'm fortunate enough that I run some of these big events, but what I live for is actually the one-on-one or the 3 of us talking. Like, that's where you get the most value and the most connection. But to me, it's like, you've got to always do things around how your schedule, your life, your business works. But if you tell me you're going to call me, tomorrow, and you don't call, that's bad. You call late or whatever. I mean, Joe knows, like, I'm always, late for stuff. When I'm blessed to talk to a lot of young people, and it's like, you always, my teacher, my mom and dad told me, like, never be late, be early. And they're like, well, you're never on time. I'm like, I'm never late enough to cause a problem, but it's, I'm always trying to jam one more thing in. And again, that can be, that can be disrespectful, and it's not my intent. And the other thing is always, if somebody in that space treats you in a certain way, call them out on it. And it's, I don't appreciate that. It's like, it doesn't mean that I didn't intend to disrespect you, but if you take it a certain way, it's like, I'm sorry, and then adjust.
So talking about your schedule and how you jam stuff in all the time, what's some good advice that you could give anybody in general, how to work your schedule, how to fit as much stuff in as possible, but still remain sane and get other additional duties done.
Well, again, I'm somebody where like I'm almost a professional, meeting person, engaging with people. And so you have to budget time like in your schedule, in your life where like, when it's blank schedule, it's like because you're doing something. And so you want to always budget a few extra minutes for something. That's another thing. Like, if whenever I meet somebody, whenever I walk into any meeting, it could be somebody I've known for 40 years or somebody I just met. I might have 45 minutes on my schedule to see you, but I always ask, like, are we still good for 45 minutes? And you might say, no, we want to talk for an hour and a half, or like, we have 5 minutes. And so that's the kind of thing of establishing what works for you. When you go into it, you're not coming off in a way where you say, like, I only got 10 minutes. Because then you can, instead of asking how's the family and how are the Eagles doing, all this stuff, you can get right into what you want to talk about. So I think those are some tips I would share on that.
What are some examples of ways you can actually convert networking into money?
So again, the key thing. So this is something that I've always done. And again, now that I'm doing this for my own business, when I meet somebody, everybody I meet, when they hear either of me or know me, that I'm connected to so many people, I want to use your connections. And so people say, hey, just tell everybody that I'm selling real estate. Just tell everybody. To me, that's not how it works. You've got to come up with some names. And it's a little bit of, you don't have to dive deep into research, but it's like, hey, I was thinking about being connected to these people. Start with some names. And then that's how people often start. So when you say, I'm trying to get into small businesses, which small businesses? I'll always say, you want to work with manufacturers. Okay, manufacturers in Allentown, manufacturers in Fogelsville, plastics manufacturing, those kind of things. Somebody says, municipalities. Okay, Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, or do you want to go to one of the little boroughs? And start with that. And so you need to know what your audience is, who your buyers are. That's one of the critical things when you go to these events is, are you going there to get buyers? That's not easy to do early in a networking event, but to make them aware of you and to have a good or service that person might be buying. That's what you always, and whether it's networking or just life, you want to leave with like, I think that person's a buyer of my services.
I think a good thing also that you can focus on, I'm not sure if you're doing this right now, but not just connecting different people to get business, but connecting the younger generation to find mentors. So finding mentors in the Lehigh Valley, say if someone starts off as a general contractor, you connect them with another general contractor that has been in business for 15 years. And you're like, hey, this person wants to be mentored, or just any profession.
Yeah, again, it's one of these things where this is something I've dealt with for a long time. So, you walk in a room and look at me and it's like an old Caucasian man, right? So, I'll sit there and be talking with 4 other guys that look like me, and you'll walk in the room as I come approach us. It can be intimidating or whatever. But one of my great joys is I don't always do stuff with the high schools, although I love doing it, but I work really closely with all 11 of our colleges and universities in this area. I love doing that. And so I'll walk into a group of young college students that go, hey, I'm Pete. They're like giggling, who cares? But you're trying to establish that connection and stuff like that. So the mentoring thing is really huge. One of the things that's happening in the world, but especially in the Lehigh Valley, is a lot of these small businesses, manufacturing, car repair shops, things like that, are run by people that are my age and older. And then they look and like their kid doesn't want to work there and everything like that. And then you get this wonderful young man or woman that lives 6 blocks away, who has a passion and an interest and some knowledge, but has no family connection. And to me, it's like one of the most important things we can do here in this Lehigh Valley and in Allentown and other places is to connect people to mentors who, again, it's like maybe give you advice, but more importantly, and sometimes give you a skill. Sometimes like, I got the skill. I might be 19. I have a skill. I just need a place to do it. And it's like, look, I'm going to close this shop down if I don't, connect with somebody like that. I think there's opportunities for us to
benefit both of them.
Yeah, it's
the
always
business owner and the person trying to get mentored.
Yeah, I think that's those are things when I run into young people, I'm always sitting there like, yes, take care of yourself and your friends but then think about other things. Somebody gives you an opportunity like, that's not for me. Well, who's it for? Like, I think I met this lady at the networking thing, and then find her card and sit there and it's like, because people love that. One of the great, you guys have asked me a couple of times, but one of the great joys I've had about helping people over time is I just like helping young people. And over the years, sometimes I've helped a young person because they came up to me and asked me a question, and it turns out like their mom ran a business and was a big shot. And you run into a and say, hey, Pete, I thank you for helping my son out. I had no idea it was her son. I just helped this young man because he asked me for help. But when you think about that, you never know who you're helping, helping grow and all that stuff. So
what are some of the clients that you're helping right now? Can you give any examples of how you're?
Yeah, so there's some interesting things. So my favorite thing, and again, it's germane for a lot of people, is I'm helping the Manufacturers Resource Center. And I don't know if the two of you ever heard of this, but Manufacturers Resource Center has been around for a long time. This Lehigh Valley has a ton of manufacturers. And so what they do, the MRC, provides training and help on some of these industry things like Black Belt and Six Sigma and marketing and all this kind of stuff, HR issues, right? But they were talking about they want to get engaged with adjacent industries is a word I'm using a lot, adjacent industries. So again, I'm sure you guys know this community has so many warehouses, logistics, transportation, trucking companies. And so they've hired me 10 hours a week to go out to all those companies who they didn't know and find out who the contact person is at this company and then say, we'd like to talk to you about our services. And so that's a really exciting thing. There's a good regional construction company builder that's out there now, and they're paying me like a monthly retainer to just represent them, to keep my ear to the ground, to talk to real estate brokers, to hear about opportunities for them. So those are some of the things that I'm doing. Some of the nonprofits, again, I've been on boards of probably a couple dozen nonprofits. Those are so important, the lifeblood of this community. They always need money and connections. And so somebody will come in like, I'm trying to get to this family, this foundation, this company, and then they use me for that. So those are some of the things that I'm doing now to help people out, I think, in some way.
Can you go a little bit more in depth on your role with the nonprofits?
So again, I've been on boards for a long time. I'm such an old man now that after all these years, I tell people I'm not going to be a board. I'm not going to be a president or vice president. One of the key things that I do, and again, not directly related to networking, but partly is I'm on these boards now often to help raise funds, right? But I'm also on the board to help recruit new board members. And then a lot of it is fundraising. And so I'll tell a story. There's a nonprofit, pretty familiar nonprofit in this area, and they serve a mission that helped a lot of members of the minority community. And yet the board was almost all Caucasian. So for a couple of years, as we were recruiting new board members, the head of the organization, other people would find somebody of color and invite them to come to a board meeting. And the person would look in and like, I'm the only black or brown person here. And it's like, maybe I'm just here because I'm black and brown. And they would leave. We brought in a new director, and she said, I need somebody that can help raise money. I need somebody that can help do marketing. I need somebody who's involved in education. I need a member of the faith community. And as she was doing the outreach, she targeted 4 people of color who had great skills in those 4 things. So when they show up at a meeting, they're looking around and they didn't know each other. They're like, okay, there's a little bit of different diversity in this room, and I'm helping out with an issue. And so magically that grew. So I'm doing things like that, connecting. People always connect to the same funders. You connect to the same people. We were saying about networking. If you're going to a networking event, it's the same people all the time. It's like, so recruiting new people. That's what I thrive on, is going with the existing relationships. When if there's somebody that none of us know, it's sort of like Pete will find out who it is. And then once it's there, it's like, here's the name, and let you guys run with it or collectively do stuff. So it's a little rambling answer, but it's like, that's kind of how I would say that gets targeted.
And that's amazing because it's just humans are such incredible creatures. And just I think just incredible for creation. We had one of my good friends, Tume Anderson, here yesterday, and he said something that is revolutionary. He said, I asked him, what does it take to be awesome, right? And he said, look, first you gotta be born, and the second one's you gotta be breathing, and if you do those 2 things, you're awesome, right? And it's amazing because that is overlooked nowadays. It's overlooked the potential of humans. Now, not every human's doing so well. Most people aren't doing well nowadays. Economy, problems, especially for the younger generation, like you said. But who they can transform into, like what are some of the young men you've been able to transform and help?
So again, I've done stories. I mean, so I often tell this story again. So when I was coaching hoops at Lafayette in 1990 and 1991, we had 23 Division I sports teams. We didn't have a single coach of color. Not one. That's a long time ago, but still we don't. And so at that time, the administration, the athletic department said, we need to mentor our student athletes of color. And somebody said, oh, Pete will do it. He's from Philly. He hangs around with a bunch of black guys. My roommates in college, 2 of my roommates were black. So it's like, Pete will do it. I coached a number of guys of color. So I did it. In the first meeting, they brought together all the student athletes. And some of the guys are like, cool, Pete's going to help us. And one of the guys, I see him rolling his eyes. And he said, what's up? And he said, I don't know why I'm listening to a white guy talk about how a black man's going to deal on campus. I said, do you know who else is going to help you? And the guy kind of looked around and he said, well, maybe you. It's like, right. I said, that's a job that I was willing to get myself out of when they hired somebody that looked like they did. But I'll never forget this. And people still remind me, a few weeks ago, I think you guys are sports guys, so like Lafayette and Lehigh played in football, and a bunch of the guys from the 90s came back to campus, and they're hanging out. And one of the guys brought that up. He said, I'll never forget when you did that, because the one young man said, I think they're using me here. They put me on the front page of the program. They talked me up about being here, and there's no resources for me. And this relates to our networking question. And I said, well, use us back. I said, what do you mean? I said, take advantage of us. Look at your professors, your coaches, and say, I'm going to play this sucker for what all it's worth. And you know what you'll find? Some of the people might be slightly disingenuous or looking out for themselves, but you'll be amazed the number of people that actually want to help you as a person. And then as you grow and you grow into this, it leads to great help. So that's something that I do. The networking space that I'm doing now is I explicitly have always focused on helping student athletes, international kids, and people that are from a long distance away, getting them integrated here. You get somebody that comes into town, they'll be from a country or city, like nobody around. It's like, I got 4 friends in the community that are from the same country you're from. You want me to hook you up with them? And it's a comfort level. You don't put all the men over here and all the women over here, but just to know somebody else likes the same kind of food, the same music, went to the high school rival. You're not alone. And then you build your own relationships. It's like a fairly simple thing, but not everybody can do it.
Do you have any advice for building influence, not just income?
So again, I think building influence is an interesting thing. Doing what you guys are doing builds influence. When you're bringing people on, where again, having your voice repeatedly on there and asking good questions and knowing what's going on, being interested, I think is a key thing. So I think that builds influence. But what a key thing is just to, show up. You don't have to wait to be spoken to before you speak up, but to share something, not because you want to put yourself up in lights, but just share. Somebody asks a question and you want to answer. I mean, I'll answer that question in an interesting way. If you guys go to some of these networking groups, sometimes they'll have a lunch and you get 30 seconds to introduce yourself. I think that's you don't need to read a script, but you need to be introduce yourself, and you need to be able to say your full name and what you do. Right? I get people that come and say, hey, I'm Tim. It's like, cool. Tim who? From what? Say what you're doing. And so you come up. But where I'm going with this is, when somebody asks me, what do? I said, I'm Pete Reinke. Every single Monday morning, I run something called 1 Million Opportunities at the Fowler Center over at Northampton Community College for job seekers. Every Wednesday morning, I run something called 1 Million Cups, which is a national program for entrepreneurs, which you guys should actually come to and present, because there's 120 chapters around the country. We're the single highest attended one. I've been doing that every Wednesday for 6.5 years. And then there's something also called LINC, L-I-N-C, which is a nonprofit in the area, which the 2 hospital networks, the colleges, and our 12 largest employers, when they bring people in here, not from the tri-state area, but from around the world, LINC provides resources to them and their families. What activities do you like? What stuff do your kids do? All these kind of things. So that's what I'm doing. So those things that I mentioned that I'm involved with, when people go to those or go to anything else and they speak up and make themselves heard and say, then you build influence. Somebody's like, it's not the same thing that everybody says. This guy asks interesting questions. It was one of the things I said years ago. I did a presentation at Deerfield High School. And one of the kids said, what's the number one thing that you guys that I can do as a 16-year-old kid? And I said, show up and give a shit. Mm-hmm. Like, pay attention, be engaged, and all that stuff. And again, if, try to be respectful or whatever, but it's like, I'm not going to, not knock you back points because, you're not, comfortable yet being mature. Just show up and do it and ask and pay attention, and then we'll make it something of it.
Yeah, showing up is the biggest part.
Yeah.
Because nothing is going to happen if you don't show up.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'll tell you guys one other thing related to networking is we did something last year. I did something with one of my colleagues to some students at Liberty High School. And it was 50 seniors, and the kids were in there. And they had business people come in to speak to the kids. And the previous people had apparently come in and say, hey, where do you guys want to go to college? Like, you don't have to go to Penn State or Lafayette or Lehigh. Like, start at the community college or do this. And then me and Vanessa came in, and it's like, hey, how many of you guys want to go to college? A little over half the hands went up. And then I said, the rest of the kids, like, what do you want to do? I got a job already. I'm doing this kind of thing. And so Vanessa and I sat down with them. I said, okay. And I said, please pay attention. Because, kids are always drifting off and like, please pay attention. And they did. And I said, if you're a high school graduate in this community, what are going to be your biggest expenses? And I think it's transportation and housing. And I said, so you don't have to work with our bank, but you got to work with a bank or some financial institution. What if I were to tell you that if you establish good credit for your own self at 18 or 19 years old, that you could save $150, $200 on your car payment or $300 on your rent? And all of a sudden I was laughing because there were a couple of guys in the corner that like were paying no attention. And one kid kind of sat up. I said, yeah, that's what I'm saying. You do your thing, but unless you're independently wealthy or all this stuff, you need to reach out to a bank or a community member. You need to reach out to a coach or a pastor or somebody in the community that you trust. It can be mom and dad, it could be your uncle, whatever. But ask a question, and then there are people out there that will direct you. But then you got to listen to them. You got to do this and like not blow your money. So that story is actually a networking thing to do outreach.
So is that something that you can help an individual with their credit, kind of link them to the right small banks?
Yeah.
And
we do that all the time. Again, there's more. If one of the key things that I was saying about networking is bringing organizations together is somebody finds the right bank for them, or they got their buddy who's helping out with credit. That's always cool. If you're good at helping people with their credit, go with it. But don't be the guy that's like, I'm going to help you two and you two, and help everybody. Like, you got to split it up a little bit. So I'm a big believer in consortiums and collaboratives and stuff, like do something to bring all the banks together, right? I talked about my time at Lafayette. Like, when I played sports, like, we played Lehigh. Anybody that's in this area knows that Lafayette and Lehigh are rivals, or that Allen and Deer for Becca and Central. But to me, it's like, you play as hard as you can to beat somebody in sports and in business. But then after it's over, like, your peers, like, why am I, unless you're taking advantage of somebody or are not competent, like, why would I not say enough stuff about you? It's like, well, they might go work with you. Well, maybe you don't want to work with them. You got to spread it out. That's a key thing that I think is important about connecting, because it's networking, but it's really relationship building. That's how I prefer to view it. Somebody had said to me, it's nice that you know everybody, but it's got to be real surface. And I'm like, ask anybody that knows me. It's like, I know people really well. I know about their families. I know what their background. It's like, because I'm interested. And I don't interfere, but if you need something that you can't control, you call me. And if I can't help you, I'll call somebody that can.
So seriously, if you want to network with one of the most important individuals in Lehigh Valley, make sure to hit up Pete. Coming to a close for this podcast, my main question now is, where do you see the younger generation, right? Guys in their 18 to 25, that range. Where do you see them in the next 10, 20, 30 years? How do you think they will help the world, or which direction do you think they're going in?
Well, it's great. I'm one of the biggest believers anybody on this earth of young people, supportive of them and stuff like that. You're young, you make mistakes, you do things, but everything's based on how people do it. But I think I'm not a kumbaya person, but it's like, I think it's great to have a strong bond with your family and your friends. In fact, that's one of the most, but it's to know people that are outside of your community, right? And so I'll answer that question by saying, I'm only using colleges as an example because it can be in the community or whatever, some of the nonprofits, some of the trade groups, whatever the case may be, bringing people together. And when I go to talk to college kids, I always say, at your campus, what are the 10 stereotypical categories of people? Commuters and athletes and, whatever. And then I ask people, how many of them are you part of? And somebody will say, usually if you give them 10 categories, you can't get more than 4 or 5. And so I'm in these 5. I said, how about the 5 you're not in part of? It's like, well, my boy is here and, my girlfriend. And then those 3, like, I don't really care for them. And I said, the way that young generation can make things happen is to get to know somebody in each of those other groups. So and the example I always used was like, offensive linemen on a football team and exchange students from China, female engineers. They would have nothing in common. But if they reach out to each other and one person from that group engages with one person, and when they have a trouble, it's like, I don't know, those guys are intimidating. And then the guy could say, we're not intimidating. We just hang out with big guys and drink beer. Well, you're so smart. Well, we're not, we're also like music, or we also like to eat food. And so it's taking care of yourself and your tribe, your group, but having outreach to everybody else out there to some extent. So I think that's one of the key things. But I mean, in society in general, things worry me just the way, there's a lot of hatred out there and stuff like that. But when you two have asked me questions about the Lehigh Valley, I think this community is unique in a lot of ways, because it's like, we do care about the Lehigh Valley a lot. We take care of each other. And I think that that's important. And again, I always tell people, if you lived here for 5 generations and the Lehigh Valley is your community, that's cool. But I've had conversations with this where somebody has arrived in Allentown from the Dominican Republic and moved here last week. Mm-hmm. So you might be new here. English might be a struggle. But if you're in Allentown and you have a roof over your head and you want to be part of this community, as of this moment, you're one of us, one of me. And I think that resonates with people when you're like, I got you before anybody else does, and then see where things go.
Yeah, I want to add to that as well. I feel like the younger generation should worry about not burning bridges as well.
Yep.
Because when you get older, most likely you're going to run into that person again, especially if you're in the same area. And I have one more question as well. What do you want people to think of you long term? Like, what do they want Pete Reinke? Like, when they think of Pete Reinke, what do you want them to think of?
It's nice of you to ask that, but I reflect on that all the time, because it happens like that. I helped you when you needed help, and I was there when you needed it at a tough time. And if not, I'm there. I'm there for you. I'll tell you one. I'm sorry to always tell you guys these stories, but like the one thing that I said is, there's so many people that I deal with. I think humbly, I might talk to more people than anybody else in the Lehigh Valley. And you watch somebody where they're struggling with their confidence or their outreach, but they help everybody else. And I sat there, I said, you got to, in the morning when you get up, look in the mirror and say, I believe in Pete. Like, I don't believe in myself, but I believe in Pete. And when you're talking to yourself, wait, I'm Pete. Like, I believe in me. But the big thing, and I'll say, Joe, about this is that I believe in all the people that I cross paths with. You always will have a supporter and a fan and somebody that will proactively help you. And I think people know that. And I'm not the only person that does it, but I feel really good that that's sort of like a legacy. Like, Pete helped me when I needed it. And when you go your separate ways, it's like, that's cool. You can be mad at me. We can not see each other for a while, but I'll always have your back, kind of thing. So that's how I would like to be thought of. And I hope I am.
That's great, man. And we appreciate you coming on, spending time here, kind of telling your story and your background. We will see you at 1 Million Cups on Wednesdays.
Yep.
Probably in the near future.
That'd be awesome.
And then we'll see you at Friends of Pete's as well. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Pete.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Pete.